U-Turn friends, guess what? It's another week on the U-Turn podcast, and today I want to talk to you about someone who I think really understands PR, communications, personal brand. We know I love a personal brand, and it's Jeff Barrett. He is a Shorty Award winner, Webby nominated, and named Business Insider's #1 ad executive. Jeff Barrett works with major influencers and brands like Adobe, Experian, Oracle, et cetera, and more on communications and influencer strategy. He's really become a go-to PR industry source for really hard to place content and brand reinvention, transformation. He spent a couple of years traveling to 60 cities, writing about startup ecosystems for Inc. and Entrepreneur. And currently he's the host of the Shorty Awards podcast. So it's no fluke. And as their chief evangelist, he was named the top 10 most sought after evangelists in the world. So today I want to talk to him about how to navigate the creator economy, how to navigate brands, and how to start thinking differently about advertisers. There's so much there. So Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I am so happy to be here. 30 minutes will probably never be enough, but it's a start.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, talk to me a little bit about where you got your start in personal brand and yeah, just anything that people can know about what landed you here.
I think this is a pretty common story that spans multiple industries. When I interview people, and I just actually finished one for my podcast with a clinical psychologist, Dr. Cal Martin. What's interesting is whether I talk to someone who's in finance, not to belabor that old TikTok meme that's already going to be dated by the time this airs, but whether I'm talking to somebody in finance or that's a realtor or a clinical psychologist, what I've known is there's been a lot of industries where people have been reticent to jump on social media or use that or be overt and open in communication. And one of the toughest fields to do that was public relations. So when I got my start, you didn't see a lot of PR pros wanting to be out front and center, talking, sharing details. I was just, an anomaly. I thought, well, I kind of know how to navigate this world. I know how to navigate communications. I think we were heading toward a world, I think predating myself. So to date myself, I've been doing this since 2007. But when I first started, I think there was a common thought that we could control the message and we can control the places and the gatekeepers that can control message. And I started to look at the landscape and look at social media and look at the way that, somebody's got a camera phone, anybody has ability to create content. And so I thought, well, I just don't think the idea of a closed messaging system or the ability to control everything exists.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that came from crisis comms. But where I got into giving advice was I wanted to be able to say, well, here the world's going to know everything. So let's be proactive about how we get messaging out there. Let's adapt, and I continue to do so. But let's adapt to what modern tools are and what things are available. Because if we take a strategy from the late 1980s, early 1990s, it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the content economy is changing so quickly all the time. It's kind of hard to keep
Always.
up. Like, do you remember when Facebook likes, people would pay for those? Like, people really paid to get a lot of likes. And then one day, all
Vanity
my
metrics.
yeah, well, it wasn't vanity metrics then. It was like really getting
Correct.
out
You
to
could use it.
people. Yeah, it was like straight up outreach. And I think I spent $2 million on Facebook ads in 2016, 17. And I remember my likes went to like 130,000 people or something like that. I don't even know. But, and by the way, fun reminder for anybody listening, you see people with a lot of likes. Sometimes they just bought them. You don't need to think that they're like this special guru that everybody just follows because they found them.
Can happen.
But yeah, I remember that moment where I was like, wow, all my posts on my public profile are getting like 1 like and not like 2,000 anymore. Like what happened? So I think it's been really humbling to see how these platforms can own your audience, own your impact, and change their mind about what you get to do with them. Can you talk a little bit about the future of where social may be going or where content may be going for people to start thinking differently about how they want to approach content now?
Yeah, I mean, we're always adapting. One of the things I was thinking about with that is, maybe even a generation ago with social media. It's true now, just as was back then. Was if you're doing something on a platform like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube or wherever it is, I mean, you're not making a lot of money on the platform. It's designed to get somebody to some other place. So if you spent too much time conversing and staying inside of that area, you weren't monetizing it. It's why I've found so fascinating, and this will bring it to the actual question, where this podcasts were cool in the late 2000s, then they weren't. And then in
Hmm.
the mid 2010s they were. And then
Hmm.
they weren't. And then they're popular again. Things are cyclical. The same thing can be said for newsletters and
Hmm.
just having a good email list. Like you have to transfer people to some kind of own channel where you can monetize it. That's incredibly important. So when I look at the current functionality of social media, and I basically call it algorithmically based social media, you're not searching necessarily. You're being fed content, right? The algorithm has determined that based on the things that you click on, that's where you're going to go. So if I'm building something out, what's interesting and fun about this is that I can take a lot of swings because I'm not necessarily curating a portfolio or a page. What I'm doing is I'm taking 100 swings, hoping two or three of them hit. And when those two or three hit, I'm going to make sure that I have some kind of mechanism in place to guide people to, okay, cool, I got your attention. Now go here.
Hmm.
That's the point to it. Where some people will bemoan, and there's negative transfer in anything that we do if we're used to one thing. And some people will bemoan like, "Oh, I wish social media was this and this," and like that's gone. It is video and it is algorithm, and so you have to build an account for that.
Mm.
That being said, I am super happy with the idea that I don't have to make a post every 4 hours. I don't have to be constantly on. I can just build for moments. I can take chances. I find a lot of freedom and flexibility in what version of social media we have going forward. I
Mm.
don't necessarily, I mean, if we want to get real in the weeds, yes, I'm monitoring what's going to happen with TikTok, but I don't think anything real is going to happen in the next couple of years. That legal process will take a long time.
Hmm.
But whatever the case may be, that is where we're heading. Other
Hmm.
platforms are going to copy. I'm very interested in social commerce, in direct shopping on social. It's one of those things where I remember early 2010s, I was always baffled by, I'm like, well, we've had the internet for like almost 20 years and people still don't want to buy like large things or furniture on the internet. I'm like, but it's easier. I feel
Hmm.
like they'll get there, and eventually they got there. And I
Hmm.
feel like the same thing is, I just like AI, I thought would take a little faster, or take people would take to it a little faster. I thought pre-pandemic, I thought we'd get there on direct shopping, but we're getting there. And
Hmm.
in the convergence of both social shopping and then Google's circle of search plus what you can do with television shows now, and you can pause it. The integration of just being able to know I'm wearing this shirt and you can find it and buy it. You see something, the product placement ideas, the sponsorship opportunities, the things that you can do with it. Awesome. So I think the two things I'm most excited about is just cool. I can have some freedom and flexibility to create a lot of interesting content, and not all of it has to hit. So
Hmm.
that takes the pressure away.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can definitely and should start selling things direct, depending on what you're doing, obviously. But I think that's going to be a big part of social going forward.
As far as just like selling things, using the shops to sell products to take people offline and into
It's for
products. Like, what do you tell me more?
no direct. I mean, just direct link in,
Yeah.
or direct ability to, have a clickable link on anything.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
gonna
So
get,
a
yeah, go
question
ahead.
about that. Like, I have Honey, the Chrome plugin. Have you heard of that one, Jeff?
Oh yeah, I've used it all the time.
Yeah, I use it all the time. So if you guys don't have Honey and you're listening, get Honey. It's such a good Google Chrome plugin. And anytime I'm at my checkout cart, especially if I'm buying clothes, I
Mhm,
press the little Honey thing in my Chrome
mhm,
thing. Very elevated language here, Jeff. My Chrome thing,
mhm.
the Honey thing, and it discounts my cart. It's like Kayak for discounts. It scans
Yeah.
the internet and applies discount codes. And next thing I know, my cart is lower than it would have been. And I can't do that on mobile in the same way.
Mhm.
And so when I'm on mobile, I don't buy clothes because I want to get back to my desktop and use the Honey app.
Yep.
And I do find that a lot of influencers, they'll share those links that are like midpoint links, like,
Mhm.
websites that hold all your links, and it feels like a lot of different links. How can content creators or people right now who are listening who want to start a business that's product based combat that? Because there are so many plugins like Honey to help people get promo codes and discounts. Like,
Yeah.
what is the hack for them to get that sale directly and think differently about how they're going to get sales?
Well, it's kind of that you're engaged. So TikTok's the best example of this with TikTok Shop. I really do feel like we're 6 months, 9 months away from the others really catching up. But with TikTok Shop, I mean, you can grab people's attention with something, whether it's a stay trashy shirt of a raccoon or whatever it is. You can get people's attention and then make them want to buy instantaneously off of that attention. It's the most frictionless experience we could possibly think of, right? Because you're not sending somebody to search. You're not sending somebody like, Instagram is still clunky with that. So I think like anything, right? The tried and true principle is, can you reduce friction? And if you reduce friction, the other thing is sometimes people will pay more just if you reduce friction. If
Mm-hmm.
you make it so easy for somebody to just be like, cool, saw it, liked it, bought it.
Yeah.
That I do understand the point of people are going to look for bargains. People are going to look for codes. I mean,
Yes.
basically, Honey is just a better version of Retail Me Not,
Yeah.
which just makes it easier and in one step. And again,
Mm-hmm.
so that becomes frictionless. So you're not going to Retail Me Not to then find a code to then go put it into your cart. You're just like, well, cool, Honey will do that for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
view social commerce the same way, where oh, cool. I don't have to go anywhere else to do this. I literally just clicked a button. All of my card info is already in my phone. I don't have to enter anything. That's a lot of what Amazon has done is just made it one click shopping. And so made it easy for people. I feel the same thing as what we're going to see in all versions of social. Maybe not LinkedIn. You're probably not going to buy something off LinkedIn, but most social platforms will build something in for content that
Mm-hmm.
allows you frictionless one click shopping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Okay. Um, I feel like when we think about content that engages people, it's always changing, right? Like
Always.
there was, and when I think about advertising, especially, I remember like, I hate to say any names, but like the Ty Lopez era where like it was like a Ferrari and like,
Oh, yeah, or a Lamborghini. Yes.
yeah,
Yes, I use this
Lamborghini.
example too.
Yeah, and I
Yep.
heard
Mhm.
somewhere that he rented that car for his ads, which is like a whole nother vibe that we could get into, but that was the era, right? Like it was like
And it
2015,
worked.
16, 17, 18, even into 19 a little bit of
Yeah.
like, look how rich I am, whether I
Yes.
own this car or not.
Aspirational. Mhm.
Yeah, aspirational. And I understand that now we're a little, there's two different and levers that we could pull, right? One is like, look who you can be, and that's probably in a good economy, like, look what's possible, versus in a bad economy, it's probably like, let me help you not sink.
Yeah.
Let me help you fix this thing. So I don't know how to like voice that in a way, maybe better if you can, but it's like figuring out what era we're in for marketing. Like, are we speaking to people's aspirations? Or are we helping them prevent
Mhm.
fearful things from happening? Like right now, there's all this talk in the news about, are we in a recession? Are we not? It's been going on forever, right? Like it's been like a
Sure.
year or two that we've been hearing this. We hear about inflation. And so the idea is that people are not doing so well. And a Lamborghini is probably not going to get them inspired as much as like a Band-Aid sort of
No.
approach to marketing of like, let me help you. Can you speak to that? And
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It's all cyclical, right? I use this analogy a lot, but, yeah, Ty is actually one of the examples I use a lot in
Oh, no
this.
way.
Yeah, 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 because it was so front and center. Um, Another good example, I'll get to Gary Vaynerchuk in a second, but, everything is cyclical, right? We at one point, you could sell things really well with an infomercial because it was new and it was different and it was fun. And then people got wise to it. And they're like, no, I know exactly what an infomercial is, right? Same thing with commercials, same things with testimonials. Things only work for so long. Things are finite, right? And that half life becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. That being said, human psychology will tell you that what Ty is doing or what Tide did will eventually work again in a different format, in a different way. We become wise to one thing and
Mm,
it becomes almost satire at some point, right? But I would say that the same way that Ryan Serhant sells property
mhm,
is it, and it works, right? The way he used social media to sell property, now everybody copies, right? So now that's becoming flooded. And
mhm,
so I think there's probably a zig in
mhm,
real estate where you could go in and be a little bit more real. Like, honestly, everybody gravitates toward different things. Some
mhm,
people gravitate towards what would be like a Ty Lopez or a Grant Cardone. Some people gravitate towards a Gary Vaynerchuk. And I've noticed over Gary's career that it was a lot about hustle culture. And then he pivoted more to relaxation and empathy and other things as he evolved and got older and was in
mhm.
the space. Like, he evolved. Most people don't evolve. He evolved. But sometimes, it could be you listen to We Could Do Hard Things or Brene Brown. That's another different way of gravitating towards kind of like just realness or relaxation. There are a bunch of different ways that you can get people's attention. So your point is valid in
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
sometimes factors outside of us dictate that, but it's also one of the things I love to talk about is we don't really have monoculture anymore. We might have brief moments of it where we might all have seen or at least talked about baby reindeer, or we've seen or talked about something, right? But generally speaking, we're not really building things anymore to reach mass audiences. We're not building one commercial to reach everyone. We're not building one thing to reach everyone. And so you can carve out for different niches, and you can carve out for different people that you're trying to reach. And so sometimes, like, think of liquid death.
Mm,
Liquid death is water in a
yeah,
can,
yeah,
but
literally.
liquid death is marketed well to a group of people that were probably kind of in that tie space, right?
Mhm,
It's a little different. It's a little funny, it's a little subversive, but and it's a little in your face, but it's working right now for canned water. So
mhm,
things evolve. What I think about most is that if you are trying to solve for what's working right now, you are already behind. What you
mm,
should be thinking about is, what can I do differently in the future?
mm,
Think about bands, right? You think about different genres of music. If you're one of the first few, you're really popular. If you were a pop punk band in the late 90s, early 2000s, awesome. If you created that band in the early 2010s, not great. If you created it now, for some reason, it's back.
mm,
So timing is a lot of it, but you can't solve for something. And I remember when the ice bucket challenge happened, and then
mhm,
somebody's like, "Ooh, can we do an ice bucket challenge?" I was
yeah.
like, "You could. It's not going to look right."
Mhm,
Or can we do like one step away? So like we do some kind of challenge, but it's with this or it's that. No, it doesn't work. It's like when people watch Hot Ones, they're like, "Ooh, how can I duplicate what Sean Evans does?" You can't.
mm.
He's incredibly good at interviewing. He's a great researcher. He has a great team. It is well produced, and that hook of getting people uncomfortable with hot wings works. However, what I can take from that lesson is, hmm, how, as an interviewer, can I make people the most comfortable and get them to be, able to and willing to disclose things? So, how do I get people to want to open up? And
Mm.
it doesn't need to be hot wings, obviously. That's already been done. So I take the lesson and behavior from something, but I strip away all of what the actual thing is so that I can solve for the next thing.
That's really interesting because I do feel like marketing sometimes has felt for me like there is a playbook. Like I
Yeah.
started webinars when webinars weren't that trendy and Facebook ads were new, and took the courses that I had to $6 million in like 3 months after a year of
Mhm.
failure, by the way, everybody, and a year of debt.
We
It
always
turned,
have to disclose that part. Yes.
yeah.
No success is overnight.
No,
It's
my God. Yeah, I still feel like I'm building my overnight success that I started
Mhm.
trying to build back when I was 24 and now I'm almost 40. So here we are.
Yes. The
I
only
feel
thing
like,
that's overnight is oats.
yeah, literally. And people think it's passive income. I'm like, no, it should be called active income. I am acting
Mhm.
for this passive income. But anyway, it feels like
That's the
marketing
one.
does have a playbook. Like there's different things, especially with advertising. So let's say somebody's listening right now, they want to start a business
Mm.
or they already have one. They're putting content out because, one of the biggest things I've learned with my agency booking and writing TED Talks for people, TEDx Talks, is that when you put a person's face in front of a nameless, faceless brand, you get more sales, right? Like you put
Mhm.
like the founder, if they get on stage and they put their story out there, the brand is going to benefit. So
Yep.
I think anyone who, even if they're hiding behind a storefront listening right now, or they want to start some sort of storefront, the news is you can't really escape having your face out there in some way if you really want your business and your brand to fully express itself and get out there in the level that you want it to, the maximum. And with that comes a playbook. And I feel like with advertising right now, for my agency, the first year we did, over $1 million in revenue. We just started, and it was word of mouth.
Mhm.
And now we're doing ads, and our ads are cranking. They're working really well. We're hearing from a lot of people. And I literally copied and pasted a very good friend's ads funnel. She messaged me and said,
Mhm.
"Hey, my ads are cranking. They're doing so well. Here's what we're
Yeah.
doing." And so I love what you're saying. Like, if you see somebody who's amazing, the ice bucket challenge, whatever, there's what I really heard you say was that there's energy at play there, that somebody is
Mhm.
going to have a vibe where it works with their vibe, and you can't just copy and paste a vibe. But there are playbooks. So can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
like advertising structures, playbooks? Like obviously Ty Lopez and what we talked about was more like how you communicate with people, but even just funnels, or even introducing people to like what is a funnel and what kind of ads marketing funnel experiences are working for people. There was a while where everybody had a quiz, everybody had a checklist, everybody had a downloadable guide, everybody had a
Oh,
webinar.
yeah.
Like, what's the
Yeah.
thing? What's the sauce?
Yeah, or a white paper that you can only get if you sign up for an email list. I think
Yeah.
I love the idea of always shamelessly stealing from other industries that aren't your own, because
Yeah.
if you see something work, generally you can transfer it over. A good example would be a lot of times you'll see restaurant concepts work well in New York, Chicago, Vegas, and then somebody will take that to a random city of 100,000 because they're like, okay, you know what? People will pay $7 for a taco and a good atmosphere and a good margarita,
Yeah.
and I can make something different and new. It's new to that area. It's not new.
Hmm.
I think it's so hard to try and create something that's 100% new.
Right.
I would say the better and the one that mitigates risk more is to try and find things that are successful in other places and see, A, is it being done in your industry? If it's not, great. B, if it is, but it's not being done to the optimal level, cool. How can you perform better with it? So I want to look at the totality of my industry and go, can I adapt something? Can I
Mm.
make something better? And then you talked a little bit about putting yourself out front, putting the founder out front. Yeah, you either need a really good story,
Hmm.
so a good story or a good tone. So
Hmm.
obviously the liquid death example applies there, right? Um, Dove doesn't have a quote unquote spokesperson; they have a spokes message.
Right.
That works really well too. And so I guess a lot of people say play to your strengths. I'd also say play to your weaknesses. If like you're
Mm.
not good at that, don't do it because
Mm.
that won't work. But you can create tone, right? You can create something, some kind of differentiation. But yes, people need to connect to a story. So what I'm
Mm.
always mindful of is what not just what the value proposition is of a business, right? Not what the numbers are, but you need to get it down to a feeling. You need to get someone to want to believe in something enough that they're like, "Oh yeah, uh, take a Stanley," which I actually don't want to have one on my desk right now. But take
Mm.
a Stanley, a Yeti, or any other random thing that is a lifestyle brand, even
Yeah.
though it's just a utility.
Hmm.
I'm always the most impressed with, can you take a utility and turn it into a lifestyle brand? Because
Mm.
if somebody can turn a cooler or a water bottle into a lifestyle brand, you have unlimited potential in whatever you're doing to
Mm.
do the same. Yes, some things will lend better to it, right? I always This is just an aside, but I always want to say with the Stanley example in particular, the thing that should not be copied is you should not build another water bottle company.
Mm.
Please, I say this with all sincerity and I look directly in the camera. We have too many. But But what I thought was really interesting, and again, I try and mine for what the example is there. Can you find something that's a legacy product that has insanely good infrastructure? Stanley
Mm.
had infrastructure, they had supply chain, they had all of the elements that were there. They just didn't have the message that allowed people to resonate with, right? So that was why it was able to take off because once they got the attention, they were able to fill the orders. The other interesting thing to think about too is build for what you have,
Mm.
right? If you are in a consulting business and you only have the ability to have 20 clients, you're going to do things a little differently than if you can sell a million widgets, right?
Right.
You can't have a strategy that's built broadly or fans out too far if you only have the capacity to sell X amount of things or only have so many hours in the day. But what's really interesting about that is, well, then you can sell based on scarcity and you can sell based on exclusivity, right?
Yes.
So if you can only do 20 things, then you're like, cool. Do you want to be one of the only 20 who gets to do this?
Yeah.
That's the pivot. The pivot is utilizing what you have, utilizing your weaknesses, and building around those.
Mm. So powerful to even, I don't know, just tune into the collective
Mhm.
consciousness and to say, how do we meet people where they are? What
Yeah.
industries are too overdone? I always want to question what you're saying because you're just so full of knowledge. I feel like you're going to have fun answers. So you were
Yeah.
saying, like, don't do another water bottle brand. There's too many already. But
Mhm.
then it's like we also hear the advice of like there's room on top. Like there's room for the cream to rise to the top. And I feel that like right now I'm working on creating a beverage to replace alcohol
Mhm.
and it will be alcohol free. But it's a slow burn me working on it, but a lot
Yeah.
of what we're talking about is the packaging, is the brand, is the vibe, is the customer. And I've got I'm up to my eyeballs right now with TED Talks, so I haven't put the time into this quite yet, but that I will in the next 6 months. But what you're sharing resonates because I was talking to somebody on the board of directors for like a very large beverage brand.
Mhm.
And she was saying it's like over $1 billion beverage company. And she was saying, oh, wow, I love how you're talking about the packaging and the customer's experience. And I was just like, really? Like that? Everything I just told you I'm doing, that's a thing that got you this excited. And so I think you are, obviously sharing some gold talking about the customer's experience. But what would you say as it relates to your comment about too many water bottles when I talk about packaging, like liquid death in the can? Like, how can we
Mhm.
also invite people to know that there's still room for them if they follow certain, I don't know, rules, if there are any, if you will?
No, that's a good follow-up question. There is room. It's
Mhm.
just easier in other places where there isn't as much competition or there isn't as much focus. I use the water bottle example because it's going to yield 20 other people wanting to try and do the same thing because they saw the success.
Right.
It's why you saw a rise in craft breweries, mostly because it takes like 5 years and a lot of investment to start a winery, but it takes a couple months to start a craft brewery. And so low barrier to entry, all that stuff. There's actually a high barrier to entry when you're talking about beverages. I want to like hone in specifically on your example. So right now you have Athletic Brewing, and they've done a good job as a non-alcoholic beer of very inherently in the name, in the packaging, and the message is saying, this is what we do, this is what we're here for. We're here to be the alternative, which I think has been much better than and O'Doul's or things in the past or non-alcoholic versions of classic. What they got wrong, I think a lot of the time in that space was that they were like, let's make it look as close to the real thing so that you don't feel a stigma for not drinking. And we're in an interesting period where there's a lot of people that don't want to, right? So you're solving for a different societal change when you're
Mm-hmm.
doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So I get excited when I think of specific examples and you bring them to me because I think there is absolutely a space to be very more overt and very more intentional about what this is and what it's for, rather than just trying to be like, hey, we're just gonna like wink wink. It's not alcoholic, but we're gonna make
Yeah.
it like I think you can lean further into that. I think there
Mhm.
is more space for that. Even though I've seen one company do it and one company do it pretty well, basically doing a much more overt, much better job than like a Michelob Ultra, but
Mhm.
not alcoholic. So, Yeah, there's space. So to answer the broader question of like paralysis of analysis of like
Yeah.
wanting to get into a space or not get into a space, it's doing the assessment of can you do something that's additive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you do something that's going to appeal to a completely different group? Or, I'm solving for who the target market is and that customer experience. And if we talk specifically to beverage, look, the first time you try something, you're trying it based on the packaging. Look at anybody who goes and buys wine or a lot of different beverages, like it's the label.
Right.
You might know, like, depending on where it is in the shelf, like, here's the Walgreens level brand, here's the mid-level brand, here's the high-level brand. So we kind of condition you to think, well, this one should be better, but you don't
Yeah.
really know. So, now if you like it, you come back. If it
Yeah.
tells a story on the bottle, interesting, then you might be more apt to want to do that, right? But yes, everything in beverage is packaging. That's not
So
true for
funny.
everything else, but I really do think about that. That you have to think about what the consumer's, like, psychology is, and the first time they encounter your product is most likely in person. Not to say that somebody won't get it off Amazon or get it delivered. That can be done, but generally speaking, it's in person. They feel the packaging and they go, am I interested in it?
Mm-hmm.
Prime is a good example right now where they just have very bold packaging and a Paul brother backing it. And, then that gets people to try it and they're like, oh, cool, this coconut water thing isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're talking about with packaging. I don't know why it just gave me the funniest memory of my elementary school teacher talking about the geography class, talking about the map. And I remember she pointed out Death Valley and it was green on the geographical map, but
Yeah,
clearly Death Valley is not green, like if you
right.
go there. And
No,
I
been there.
remember, I don't know why this memory was stored from like second grade, but I remember she was like, so you don't want to be someone that's like, let's go to Death Valley, like mispronouncing it, being like, it's so green. And I feel like that's just like as a culture, we are conditioned to be swayed by beauty. That's why sex sells. That's why, and
Yeah.
speaking of all of this, you're making me want to ask you about PR. Like, what can
Let's
it do? What
go.
can it do? Because I feel like you
Oh,
are
I
a
love that question.
very
Yeah.
innovative thinker. I know that press does not always mean sales. A lot of press can mean sales. The right press can mean sales. Talk to me a
Mhm.
little bit about what you feel PR can and cannot do.
I always try and I think I explore radical honesty in this field,
Yeah,
and I'll give myself a couple of minutes to cook in a second here, but, uh, when it comes to PR, I want to be upfront and tell you, absolutely, when I'm doing a first meeting with a client, I'm level setting expectations. I'm making sure that you and I are on the same page, that our goals are aligned, and I'm also telling you what I can do that you maybe didn't think could be done too.
right,
It's not just one way or the other. But what I want to explore with that is sometimes the impulse, especially if you come from a marketing background, because the nuance in PR is that sometimes we're working with a marketing team, sometimes we're working with a comms team, sometimes we're working with a sales team. But the impulse is always to be like, well, how do we measure it, right? How could we build a direct
right.
response offer into it, right? That would, be like, it would be like, I forgot what you mentioned earlier, but I was going to joke with, oh,
Death Valley,
well, no, no, no. It'd be like use code U-turn for 20% off Honey. Even though Honey's a
right.
free browser edition, but you know what I mean. Like that's a direct response offer. You say do this, and then I can track that. The
Hmm.
problem in doing that in PR content is that we're building brand, we're building affinity. We're trying to build things up so that you can then do some kind of sales tactic to extract from that brand affinity
Yeah.
with monetization. If you built that into PR content, people will see through that, right? It'll be when I work with creators, one of the things I try and tell brands, if you build something that's exactly in their voice, you get 100% of their audience. If you build something that's in your voice, you get 20% of their audience. Do you still want to work with them if you're getting 20% of their audience? Probably not. So you need to allow for things to be in their voice.
Mm.
What PR can do is it can sway opinion, it can build brand, and it can give your sales team the necessary tools to go out and make a cogent case for why you are the best thing to buy, the best tool, the best consultant, whatever it is. I build anything in PR in reverse.
Mm.
I'm not trying to newsjack. I am not trying to, you know, there might be an opportunity for you to be like, how does your product relate to Taylor Swift? And I'll be like, well, cool, you got news, but did it actually do anything for you? No. So I want something to be tangible, right? I don't want you to just try and apply yourself to anything that's in the news just so you got the hit. I'm
Right.
not concerned with, did we get you out there? I'm concerned with, what did it do to build brand affinity, or what did it do to propel you forward? So in the way that I think, I'm very much building it with, well, what are the 5 or 6 things that your salespeople are talking about? Because let me give you irrefutable points that they can go to. And all PR is it's making sure that people find what you do trustworthy and valid.
Mm,
It's another third party recommendation to say, yeah, okay. Well, if the New York Times says this is a good thing, then probably it is a good thing, right? That's inherent in the nature of it. So what I try and tell clients what PR can do is, we can do a lot,
mhm.
but we better have a plan in place for you to implement all those things. Because if you expect somebody to click on a Forbes article and then buy something, that probably isn't going to be the right
No.
expectation. And I wouldn't try and tell you that it is. So, what I want to do is, I want to create trust and validity. And I can do that all day long.
Right.
Then, but before we do that, and when we're doing an intake meeting, well, what are the sales metrics and what are the things that we can build toward, and how can we use this to support? Yes, it's not as direct as
Yeah.
advertising or marketing, but over time, this is how car companies, insurance companies, a lot of companies who are in like industries, this is where they benefit the most.
Yeah.
Because if you have an affinity for one brand, when you need to make that purchase, which is not very often, but when you do, you're going to go with the one that you remember and that swayed you in some way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, final question.
Ooh,
I
all
mean,
right,
I
can't
know
wait.
that in the content world, I see a lot of friends talking about behind the scenes and people are really into that.
Hmm.
I struggle with that personally because I don't know, like sometimes my behind the scenes is boring. Like, and I don't even need to do that whole pep talk on this show that you're not going to do that because you're too seasoned to do this. But to say, oh, your behind the scenes isn't boring and play ping pong with me about this, it can
It
be.
should be.
Yeah,
For
that's
your
the
own
thing.
mental health, your behind the scenes should be boring. You
Yeah.
should not be on 100% of the time. Amen.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I struggle with is like, I'm not like on set at like the news station and like getting my hair and makeup done and da 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 da. Right now I have a broken finger. Look how blue it is, Jeff. It's really not pretty. I
Ooh.
know. I look like a dead person in my hand. It's just so green. But I have a broken finger. I'm going to the the orthopedic surgeon. That's it. Like it's really. And so I guess I want to ask for everybody listening, how do you get your voice? How do you be front and center? And how do you still feel yourself? Because I've had way too many people, like people who read my book, they know my spirit because there's so much me in there
Mhm.
because I'm a writer and it gets across. I think in video sometimes, not on the podcast, I feel like I'm definitely myself here,
Yeah.
but on video, I don't feel myself. And I'm still finding my voice, which honestly, Jeff, I should ping you to look at my Instagram because I'm starting to release videos right now. And I literally don't know if I really know what I'm doing. Um,
Yeah.
thank God people hire me for TED Talks and not Instagram Reels right now. But can you tell me a little bit about like how to start thinking about that for people who are struggling to
Oh, I
figure
love
out how do
this.
I be front and center?
I love this as a final question. We are three-dimensional people. We have a public persona, we have a private life. You can put yourself out there and be available and front and center, but choose to hold things back. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a real power in just being radically honest
Hmm.
about who you are and what you are. But I would say, in all honesty, the version of me that is on the internet, obviously, yes, the podcast version is probably the most calm, relaxed version you're going to get. Although I don't, over time, because when you first start doing this, you copy.
Yeah.
You see what's working and you go, ooh, I need to make content. And I remember there was times of me during Vine and Snapchat where I was like out in the wild and like, ooh, let's make content. And I was like, well, that person's annoying. I
Mm,
am that person and I don't want to be that person. So you find balance. I mean, let me give you a really good example. I used to live in a city of 1 million people. 2 years ago, we moved to a city of 40,000. I live on a
Wow.
bike path, and I live on a river, and I can just look at nature. I can look at a river. I can get on my bike when I want to. I create balance. So yeah, I'll go host an award show one week, and yeah, I'll go give a speech, and then I will, I'll have bursts of time where I'm on, but you cannot be on 24/7, and you need to have these moments and these retreats. And the other really important thing I want to level with everybody on is if you start to get a little bit of success and you start to get a little bit of notoriety in any field, especially with social media, there's going to be a dopamine rush that you're going to feel. You're going to feel that, and then you're going to crave that more and more. And
Ah,
my advice would be, as somebody who has done social now for over 15 years, and has ridden the highs and lows of that, is that you should try and wean yourself from that as much as possible. That it's great, it's helpful. Applaud yourself for getting to a point where you even have that, because that's a really hard, it's a really hard space to be in, right? So because of how competitive that space is, I understand the natural human inclination to want to do more, hold on to that, crave that more. But if you're building content just for the dopamine rush, you are losing the sight of why you got there in the first place, which
yeah.
is I'm selling a product.
Mm-hmm.
That product might be me, but I'm selling a product, I'm selling a service. I am not my job, unless you're a creator, which is awesome. But generally speaking, most of the people we're talking about, your job isn't to be 24/7 on social and to be there. So use it for what you need to use it for, and then find ways to disconnect. But I think you can be open and vulnerable to an audience without having to share your entire self. My best advice, and to close that, is just save some things for you.
Mm, I love that. Such a fine line between what's personal and private. Where can everybody find you?
LinkedIn, Twitter is
Great.
both of them are at Barrett All. Um, Shorty Wars podcast. It's no fluke. Just all over the interwebs. Happy to
Great.
chat anytime.
Get it, shawty. Get it, shawty. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it.